Tell us about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, my journey has been split into 3 different areas.
What is Emediately? What problem does it solve?
A secure version of ChatGPT. Name one of the scenarios where you didn't stay close to the customer.
Back in my early days when I was a project manager. Hey, and welcome to the Change Leaders Playbook, giving you all things delivery leadership in a podcast. I'm Cliff, an experienced leader of change initiatives with a passion for the teams and the businesses that are leading the way. Now, are you interested in using AI to help your business or your team, but not really sure how to go about it, and certainly not sure how to go about protecting your data? Maybe you're starting a new team or a venture and want some tips on how to avoid certain traps. Well, I cover all this and more with my guest, Jaymie Thakordas, CEO of Emediately, which is an AI-driven startup that helps small to medium businesses to access secure, privately hosted large language models through one easy-to-use application. So this is going to be an amazing opportunity to have a chat with Jaymie, pick her brains, get some new insights. So let's welcome Jaymie. Jaymie, hi. Welcome along to the show.
Hi, Cliff. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Really good. Good to see you. Good to meet you. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's get straight into it then. So you are CEO of Emediately. However, you didn't start out in tech. Tell us about your journey. What was your original career path and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, my journey has been split into 3 different areas. First part was very glossy and glamorous in that I worked in the publishing industry for major media outlets such as Condé Nast, which is House of Vogue, for Harper's Bazaar, which is within Hearst, and Evening Standard, which is part of Associated Newspapers. So that first part really was around global sales and marketing, working with, brands, super brands, working with the likes of luxury watchmakers such as Patek Philippe, right the way through to, the largest media agencies in London and worldwide. So that first part was really around magazine publishing, around going to lovely catwalks and fashion shows and working on, some amazing marketing campaigns. And I, did a lot of, training, let's say, during those early years to finesse and refine my sales and marketing skills on a global platform. So that was, it was fabulous. Second part really was around when I moved back to the sunny West Midlands and I started working with probably the best part of 500 plus SMEs. That was a kind of business support area of my life where I worked within universities. I worked at Growth Hub. I also worked within and consulting small to medium businesses within sales and marketing and really getting them to understand how they are selling and marketing their products. So that was a lot of fun because, that really gave me true insight into how SMEs work. And the third part really was in the last 5 years where I started working with some tech brands. Actually, they were a group of, real avant-garde thinkers, people who see how future looks like using technology. And I was fortunate enough to get into the skin of these, of the tech, of AI, this mystical thing that people talk about and don't understand as much. So I spent time to get into the skin of the tech and work with some really great people to understand how it all comes together and how, technology underpins was the backbone of a successful business. And so really, wrapped in that 25 career is a real story of resilience as well. Lots of self-belief, lots of imposter syndrome, plenty of parent guilt in there as well. So, it's been quite the journey, I have to say.
Yeah, that's a very, very diverse story in terms of the avenue that you've taken. I guess it also shows that you don't need to start in one place to be in another place in terms of your career. And for anybody that's probably thinking about, am I in the right role? Am I in the right career path? Probably isn't too late. So it's worth thinking about that too. It's also interesting thinking about what you said around the marketing, working with marketing brands and how to market to organizations and businesses. I expect that experience is coming in very handy with your current role. So bear that in mind in the next question, which is again all about Emediately. What is Emediately? What problem does it solve? And marketing, what does that fit in?
Well, the easiest way to explain what we do is that we are the private and secure version of ChatGPT. So our product's called SME.ai, I thought I'd make it very obvious. And, what we have to do is step back a moment and ask, what is ChatGPT? And it's something called a large language model. What's a large language model? Well, it's an advanced type of an AI, which is designed to understand and generate human language, right? So at a starting point, that's what it does. And these models are trained on massive, I'm talking huge data sets, and it enables them to recognize, predict, translate, and generate content content or, text data. So when you now know what a large language model is, and there's a lot of them that are out there, it's not just ChatGPT. I mean, that's one of the public models that exist out there, and many others that you may see through public forums, such as Google, Meta, so on and so forth. But what we do is we actually use private large language models. And what it does is we solve two problems. One is the data and security issue, which is, there's a huge challenge around data and privacy at the moment when people are using public AI. So I think the thing to think about here for everyone who's listening really is about how are you using this public AI? What data are you putting in? I guess who are aware of the security stroke privacy challenge, they don't get to use this type of tech, or they're very wary in how they use it. So they can't be fully, let's say, free or creative with how they use it and use it to its potential. It's something that's really important around the problem that's out there, which is using something that's not data secure. And it's massively talked about at the moment within all worlds, really, from a cybersecurity standpoint. The other problem that we solve really is the adoption part, because 99.9% of businesses out there actually don't know how to capture the value of this generative AI, or let's say ChatGPT or these LLMs as such. They don't actually know how to use it and use it to their advantage for the purposes that they may have within their businesses. So yeah, that's the second thing that we solve, because large businesses and large enterprises are using it out there. And what we wanted to do is really put that kind of power in the hands of everyday businesses. So they're the two problems that it does. And what can it do? Well, it can do tons of things. It can, let's look at it functionally in a business, right? So in a business, you've got functions such as marketing, sales, product, HR. Well, there's up to, I'd say, 30 different, I was counting earlier today, and there's up to 30 to 40 different use cases. So from your regular content generation, such as social media, blogs, market research, competitor analysis, right the way through to product descriptions, product comparisons, user manuals, user stories, translations of all of that information in the HR department, job descriptions, employee handbook. You may also say to me, well, ChatGPT can do our social media. And that's true. The difference is, though, with what we do is you can add your company documents, right? So whether that's your marketing plans, your marketing brochures, product plans, from that very tailored single source of truth, let's say, because it's your company information, so it's true, right? You can create content off the back of that, and that information is going to be a lot more accurate than what you would get in a generic question that you may ask a public AI model like ChatGPT. So that's what it does.
Right. So I was just thinking about that in terms of, it's quite a different set of features that you described in terms of what SME.com does. How did you go about figuring out which ones were the highest priority, which ones were potentially the most valuable? And actually, it's okay if you're still on that journey because it's the early days, right? How are we thinking about, figuring out what those priorities are? Because I think until people start to give you lots of feedback, it's difficult to know which of the areas to double down on.
Yeah, I think, it's a great question in that I'm sure you'll know that when you're in tech teams and with tech CTOs and developers, they have a ton of ideas. And I think for me, it was really working out, how do you find, what does the customer want, right? What problem is it solving? And it goes back to the real basics as I understand it. And how and what does that look like in features? And for us, it was about, how do you personalize? This is a custom build type architecture, right? I'm using some techie jargon there, but what that basically means is we put a curated set of tech tools together in one, let's say, application. And what we needed to understand was, what does it do? What does it need to do that's going to help, or let's say, catalyze this business owner or a marketing manager or a product manager? How's it going to catalyze their process and make their life easier? So the features that we involved, that we put together were simply around adding documents, different document types, looking at how easy it is to use as well, because with any piece of tech, the minute it becomes complex or complicated for anyone, people switch off, right? And you don't get that engagement or retention. And we want people to use this every day as part of their, let's say, the daily tasks that they conduct, because it can do a whole heap of things, as I mentioned. So we want people to use it. So it's got to be easy to use. It's got to be useful. So those initial kind of features had to be real hooks, right, around around how they use it and just the user friendliness of it. That's really important for me, because I want people to find it easy to use and find it generally very useful as well. They were the key priorities.
That sounds pretty accurate to me, especially what you said to me about user friendliness. User experience and user-centered design is often not ignored, but not put front and center. And I've seen that a lot. And what I find as well is that there are some solutions and some products out there that they do this similar thing, or if not the same as something else, but because they're so easy to use and they're just easy to adopt, then they will be adopted faster. They get traction. So I think it's really insightful and good to hear that that's something that's important to you and your team as well.
It is. And then I think it's because it's important because I've seen it done the other way as well. And I'm the non-techie in the house, right? So for me, it was always about understanding what's the best way we're going to get people excited and using the product. I've also seen people in other tech companies that I worked for where, I've been directly in front of the customer and they are struggling to understand how to use a really, really important piece of functionality that would make a big difference to the day, but they don't know how to use it. So I think for me, that's why that kind of thinking was front and center, user-centered thinking was at the top of my agenda.
Thanks for that. I've also got a question now. Leading on to your team must be looking at they must have so many ideas, different features, different ideas that they want to push forward. How do they go about working together to make sure that, first of all, they get the right ideas on the table, but also that actually they just get things delivered on the right time and work effectively? So this is really all about how the team are delivering what they needs to with such short time scales and not much in terms of resources, but a big products to deliver. How's that working?
Yeah, it's going well, actually. There's a couple of variables or few variables that we're dealing with. One is, as you rightly mentioned, a very low amount of resource in terms of budgets and huge teams. We don't have huge teams. There's three of us in the space with a number of several developers who carry out some of the groundwork for us. The other thing really around that, the other issues around that, well, not issues, but I would say, I guess the benefit really for us is that we're dealing with three senior heads, right? I've got 25 years of working with customer, understanding SMEs. Chenga's the other co-founder, is product lead, has ran, global transformation projects, at WPP and the like. So, he's got a real handle on working within timescales. And Vic, who's our technology director, he's an absolute AI technologist, a pioneer of his own making. And, that combo works really well in that there's quite a bit of understanding on what do we need to deliver and why, right? And how those team structures come together. And, James has worked in other environments where we've all applied agile methodology, right? So it's quite a well-known methodology within the tech space and software space. And so a lot of our work, goes into a scrum. The great thing is we can catalyze issues pretty quickly because we've got experience, right? That's where the difference, I guess the USP internally or from a core team perspective is that we know how to problem solve, and we've experienced loads of these problems before in other guises, in other organizations and projects. So for us, it's right, this is an issue. What's the next thing? How do we solve this? And, a different form of problem solving hat. We're all problem solvers. So we're pretty creative about that. And that keeps our costs low because we're not having to, let's say, try a load of different things for it to work within a few, let's say, tries as such, or a few different options. We'll get there.
Yeah, fantastic. So leading on to that then a bit more, how about the thought process around your leadership, first of all? So you've gone from one type of leadership role to a different one. You've experienced lots of challenges. What are you learning about leadership in this guise, in your sort of relatively recent role compared with the past? What do you think others can learn from that?
I think my problems as running a startup are no different to any other startup is the reality. I think, budget's always going to be an issue. Tech is a commodity that I'm working with that has a high price tag when it comes to development. And I think leadership comes in a number of forms internally and externally. How are you talking about your product? What do you want it to do? Where do you want to leave that legacy externally? And how do you want people to remember you is one thing. And I think that's, I'm actually at the start of that journey. I think the other side to it is internally, how are you working within the teams that you're working in? What kind of culture are you creating? I think that challenge will always change based on how you scale. And the way in which you scale and the types of people you hire. But I think given all the organizations I worked for, I want it to be I want us to be grounded. I want us to be kind people, right? Because we're a tech for good business and we want to democratize tech, a good chunk of people putting the power in their hands. And I think with that kind of thinking and having that passion, I'm a people's person. So I think, I love working and talking, collaborating with others. That leadership is about, you've got to lead with a good attitude from the start, and one that's focused though, because, there is once, it's all well and good being kind, but you've got to get jobs done. You've got to make the business work. So, there's some pretty tough decisions to make in that process. And, also being a female in what is sometimes seen as a male's world as well, you can get overlooked. Yeah. So it's managing some of that self-doubt in that picture and really flying the flag for what you're doing. And I'm really passionate what I do because I know that it's going to help. So, help a good chunk of business owners, business people, organizations and teams to make a difference to their day. And I guess our mission is to democratize tech, cutting edge or bleeding edge tech actually, and help people to elevate their daily experience and their work, right?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And have you had times where you have been pushed back, or you've been given maybe the cold shoulder because maybe you don't fit the traditional mold of what people might see as a tech leader or as a tech organization? And how have you sort of handled that? Because you must have a lot of knockbacks and have to keep going back up again and grinding through, and it can be demoralizing. How have you managed that internally?
I think it's really around, this is a really new piece of tech. It's a nascent piece of technology that people don't really understand. So it's easy to to say, oh, we don't understand that, it's not for us, or it's nice to have. So you have to really cut through that effectively, that kind of remark. But I think that, I'm a salesperson. If there's anyone that can do it, I should be able to do that. So I think for me, it's about getting the narrative right and getting it out there and getting a good set of group of people around you who talk about it, positively as well. I think it's that, having your team, right? Having your people around you and your networks and circles. So I think that's how you overcome it. That's not to say it doesn't affect you, because it does, because you do question yourself. And naturally, most people question themselves once they get some form of rejection. But, I'd like to think, or I used to definitely have camel skin in the sales world. So maybe I need to, think about get into that mindset, because that's how you move forward.
Yeah, indeed it is. And you mentioned networking as well. I was thinking to myself about networking and where that fits into marketing and how to do it authentically. I want to learn from you based on your past experience, and clearly given that you can have the best product in the world, right? But if it's not made visible and if you've not got it in front of the right people, it's not going to be as successful as you want it to be, right? So what are your experiences and tips that you give to other people about how to network and how to get your product out there? I know you've not finished that journey yet. You're still at the early stages with this particular venture. How would you describe that?
I think for anyone who's, we're dealing with a digital product, right? So it's not like when I worked at, let's say, House of Vogue or Harper's Bazaar, I couldn't pull out the magazine in front of me to say, hey, look at this glossy thing over here. So you've got to be strategic, as any business operating, you've got to be strategic in what networking forums you go to, right? What kind of people, who's your target audience, right? And are you going to meet them there? And how are you going to tell them your story, right? Because you've got a finite amount of time, which is, as most people call the elevator pitch. So it's really about being intentional in those networking sessions, whether they're online or not, or in person. I love in-person networking sessions because I think we live in a very digital world. And post-COVID, I miss being around people. So I think I make it a pinpoint certain networking sessions and go and meet those people and look at who's on the list and the networking list. If you've got that opportunity, go and have a look and think about, do your research, right? As any salesperson or any person who's talking about product or a service with passion, be relevant, right? Go and have a look at their business type. In my case, if I was going to, let's say, a manufacturing forum, I would pick out some real important use cases that are potentially a pain point for that manufacturer, and then talk about it from that perspective. So be relevant in how you talk about it and keep your language really simple. Apart from that, get out as much as possible. And, I've gone from having big budgets to, doing a lot of this myself as well, and there's no shame in that, right? You are running a startup, you're making your money go as far as it can go. So, but it's not going to be all glossy and a brand like, but there's some great tools out there for you to really represent yourself and your brand. So yeah, harness them well and get out there on the important networks and forums online. Get it out there, I would say.
Yeah, great advice. I'd also say as well that having a limited budget in many ways can be a bit of a superpower, right? Because it forces you to marketing a product or having a project where you to get something out there in the first place. It really forces you to look at what is your priority, what features do you really want, what marketing channels do you really want to go to, and how can you best get that return on investment for your ad spend or whatever it is you want to do. So in many respects, certainly early on, it is a really, really good superpower to have, and just use it to your advantage is what I've been told and what I've learned from as well. So hopefully that's a fun challenge that you're having to get on with as well.
I don't know about fun, but it's certainly a challenge. And that's what I can say.
It's fun as good as possible.
I'd much rather some zeros.
Yeah.
Plenty of zeros for that ad budget or whatever branding we're doing. But that'll come with time, right? It's
Indeed.
one of that. You kind of have got to go through this process, which keeps you grounded and focused. It keeps you focused, on what thing counts, because you have to make it count.
Absolutely, it does. Let's move on to the lovely topic of LLMs. I'm interested to know your view around where do you see large language models in future, the use cases that could be potentially used for, even the pitfalls too. What's your view based on your experiences so far?
Yeah, so where do I think it's going to go? I think there'll be more language models out there. So if you just think of it as a different AIs that are out there, there'll be more that's specific to industries and use cases within those industries. So let's say HR, there'll be a whole use case. Whatever use cases that fall under the banner of HR, whether that's onboarding, whether that's employee handbooks, contracts, whatever it is, job descriptions, there'll be an LLM dedicated to that. And so I reckon there'll be these large language models, or let's make it easier in terms of our language AIs that will be out there, advanced AI, that'll be out there for each particular industry and the use cases that sit within that industry. It's all about how people use it, right? And that's the important thing here. I think the features and functionality, it's going to, I reckon there's going to be some fantastic ways you can reduce workload, reduce cost. Using a large language model, I was looking at some of the costs involved. You're looking at 70% decrease in costs, right? On, let's say, social media or marketing costs or product costs or using copywriters. Some of that ground level work you can do on it right now. So I think that's just only going to increase. Yeah, I think it's all about, there'll be a lot of fear mongering still in the space about humans are going to get replaced. That narrative isn't going to change. But I do think that it's a very powerful piece of tech even now. And it's changing. It's moving at breakneck speed, right? This industry has moved massively in just this 1 year. So I think, what will tend to happen is we'll see a lot of niching in specific industries. I don't think there's a negative use case. It will boil down to how humans use it and how people use it right now. The power is definitely in the hands of people.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a lot of skepticism out there, and I'm sure we'll get there. There's so many technologies where people are so skeptical about, even the horse and cart versus the car, right? People are very skeptical about that. Clearly proven to be something that has been more valuable than not having an automobile. So we'll see how it plays out, and I'm really excited to see how companies like yourselves are really changing the game in terms of looking at new use cases, putting customers and users first, and trying to solve real world problems. So yeah, looking good. Before we wrap up, I do like to try and put myself on the spot just to keep myself engaged and on the edge, so to speak. So I'm going to give you a chance to ask me a question, so if you want, but at least one question, anything to do with leadership, delivery, anything that you're just curious about, and I will, unprompted, I'll just answer. Have a think and take your time and go for it.
As someone who delivers projects on a regular basis, name one of the scenarios where you didn't stay close to the customer in terms of their objectives. What happened, and what would you have done that was different, in hindsight?
Okay, good question. So back in my earlier days when I was a project manager, my focus was a lot on project stakeholders, keeping them happy and getting the team to deliver what we all thought was the right thing to do, right? So I won't name specific project names or organizations, but that has in the past been my focus in my early days. And what's happened at the end of that is we've we've gone on and said, yeah, look, we've delivered the project for you. We've done it on time. We've done it on budget. Amazing. And we've done it to the right quality expectations as well. Perfect. Right. Aren't we successful? But then when the project, the solution was actually put out to its user base, the return on investment was not what it needed to be. Nowhere near. Absolutely nowhere near. And as a result of that, whilst the project was deemed as a roaring success, the product was not. And that was a big eye-opener to me when that happened to me the first time around. And I thought, actually, what is the point of project management if you're just delivering a mechanism to fail? Effectively. From then on in, I thought to myself, I want to be able to deliver mechanisms to help success happen. And to do that, I need to understand, what do users want? What does the business want? When does it want it? And what's my role in making that happen? And then effectively working backwards. And so I have a thing where I'm dead against delivering a project per se for the sake of it, but I really want to make sure that when we invest in funding to land something, that we, where possible, try and test it first and see whether it's going to have the value that we want it to have before we increase our investment.
Right.
Now, some types of delivery, like programs or projects or whatever we want to call them, you can't always do that, especially if you're having a large infrastructure change to re-platform, server farm or something like that, for example. That's not necessarily possible to a degree, but wherever possible, I try and make sure that we test it first, but also that we have a really robust case around what it is we want to achieve with the metrics behind it. That took a lot of learning, and it was a difficult lesson to learn, but I think it's been a good one to learn.
Yeah. It's a process, right? You go through these different experiences and learn and layer, and those learnings just layer and layer as you go on. So, well, thank you for that.
Great. Thank you so much. And I've really enjoyed the conversation, Jaymie, but actually our time is almost at an end. So it's been a real pleasure catching up with you. And I'm going to link everything about Emediately and your product and you as well. So if people want to catch up with you and find out more, they're going to be very free and welcome to do so. Also, reach out to us via the newsletter, which is at changeleadersplaybook.com. You'll get more information, especially a summary of every episode, which is going to be one for this one as well. Other than that, looking forward to catching up with you on the next episode. Bye for now.